Chapter 11. I wanted to test out the new prototype, something big to test the limits of the new toy. I grabbed some jerky before walking out the door. When I turned around, I was greeted by the sight of a large predator, one I could easily recognize. This was a very large bear. His head stood a few feet above mine, his eyes strangely human, paws with talons the length of my fingers. He was breathing heavily, eyes widening slowly. My body was frozen as I watched his nose twitch in the wind. He could smell the jerky in my back pocket. I take it out slowly and throw it towards him. He doesn't even glance at it. He lunges at me, crossing 10 yards in a second. I panic, flinging my right hand toward the animal, and happen to point the laser on him. The bear is stopped in his tracks, hovering just above the ground. His eyes filled with rage and his breath fills my nostrils. My matter control is holding him, but not for long. Back up slowly to my door, and let the being go as I slam the door shut. His steps shake my foundation. The walls wobble slightly. The creature belts out a scream so eerily human, I almost thought one of the villagers was being attacked. I sat in a huddled position on the floor next to the door until the creature left. He was here from midday to sundown. None of the villagers dared to attack the creature. I spent the next days building a transmitter for the electricity from the ground. If I could tap into it with my matter control, I could take on those beings. The chief came by again, urged me to move into the village with him. I turned him down and continued working. I couldn't see his face when he left, but I knew the expression on it. The next time I stepped outside, he was waiting for me. This time, though, the creature wasn't alone. His two brothers had come along for the show. All three had the same expression, their body language indicating violence at the drop of a hat. Each of them launched in unison. They were fast, yet I had them stopped within a second. They bellowed at me, eyes frantic. I could feel them struggling to move, like a sleep paralysis. I studied their coats for a second, then their claws. This species did have opposable thumbs, still fresh with blood. I turned them to face backward toward the trees, and then let them go. The brother I faced earlier turned and gave me a piece of his mind, while the others slowly made their way back into the forest. I was looking in their direction when a shrill scream echoed through the woods. The three brothers quickened their pace. Their mother was around for sure. Scanning the trees, I caught a glimpse of her white fur. She was at least 2 times the size of her own cubs. Chapter 12. I had to check my pants when I got back inside. The coating was flawless, of that much I was sure. It was still a shock to me that it held. If I wanted any chance at surviving those creatures, though, I'd need at least another one. The other hand was feeling like a weak point. It was back to the grind for the time being. The process was tried and true, and I was able to replicate it in record time. I tested it out first alone, then put the two together and worked out the kinks. It took the rest of the day, but it was well worth it. Since the creatures were in the woods, I would have to ask the villagers for food. Curiosity of how they would react to my technology is what forced me out the door. I knew the chances of walking into another fight were near certain. Those cubs would be angry and ready to seek vengeance. They weren't the only ones there, though. Mother, in all her space, sits just behind them. She was white as the moon on its brightest nights. Her fur was longer than the cubs. She, along with the cubs, kept their eyes on my every move. I shut the door behind me slowly. We were locked in mortal combat. I awaited the cubs for what felt like an eternity. They lunged at the same moment toward me. Again, they were frozen before taking another step. Their mother bellowed at me, her breath hot and rancid. I noticed movement behind her. The trees she knocked into getting here were now about to come down on top of her. I had a choice to make. I raised my left hand to intercept the mother. She strains against me. My bicep begins to feel resistance as well. Her eyes begin to water, and the lowest growl I've ever heard comes in like a fog rolling over the grass. My heartbeat sensor chimes at me. Another creature approaches from my right. The trees give way to the body violently shaking the ground like an earthquake. The biggest one of them all comes barreling into the clearing. His black fur is short, unlike the mother. He doesn't seem to even stop to think before knocking her out of my matter control. The two fall on the ground, knocking me off my feet. The cubs are no longer in my control either. The trees fall just feet from my house. The mother and father take a moment to argue, while the brothers collect themselves. It didn't take long for them to look back in my direction. They lunge at me a second time, but are knocked out of the air by their father. I watch the creatures get up and fall in line behind their mother. They leave me without a scratch, the shock still making my hands wobble around. Picking myself off the ground, I noticed the transmitter for the matter control broke when I fell. Fixing it shouldn't be too much of a hassle. I was just glad to be alive. Chapter 13. I had to go back to the scrapyard yet again for more supplies, but the transmitter's fixed now. If I wasn't still currently afraid for my life, I'd be proud of myself. The matter control was strong enough to hold a full-grown adult Bishnuk. I couldn't help but go over those moments with the father, why he chose to protect me from his own cubs. They were the top of the food chain this far, and I was just doing my best not to get eaten. The warriors finally gathered the courage to come to my house. I told them all the details I could in a broken version of their language. As I was finishing, the chief opens the door. My house never had this many people in it before. Men sat on the floor, my bed, and stood with their arms crossed listening to every syllable. I could see the fear in the chief's eyes. He faced these monsters on his own before too, I'm sure. He watches without speaking as I lift objects from my matter control. The warriors lose their minds, while the leader doesn't so much as chuckle. After the men leave, I walk over to the edge of the woods to take a leak. The sky has more stars in it than I'd ever seen from Earth. I watch my breath turn into a mist as a sharp pain begins to spread up my leg. The next moment I was on the ground. I was being dragged by my ankle into the forest by an animal I couldn't even see. The pain wasn't the only thing I could feel. The ground beneath me was vibrating. I kicked at the animal desperately with my free leg while screaming at it. The animal jerks my leg with a force that nearly popped the bone out of my hip. I fight for consciousness while grasping at air. My body is lifted off the ground for a moment before plummeting back to the dirt. I feel the sensation in my ankle come loose as a shrill whimper envelops my hearing. The animal's body hits a tree trunk with an audible impact. Again, my body was lifted off the ground, my clothes being soiled with the liquid on my back and running down my foot. My vision like that of a turtle on its back. I watch in horror as the creature slowly walks toward the village. The creature didn't so much as bob its head with me in its mouth. It carefully walks through the clearing toward the large fire. Villagers cower in their homes, and children sob quietly. The only one I could recognize walking towards me was the shaman. The creature stops just outside the village and sets me on the ground as carefully as possible. I fight to keep my eyes from closing. Chapter 14. I awake to the shaman standing over me. He laughs at me before I can even remember where I was. Even though his walls are made from brick, he chose to keep the thatch roof. He hands me a small cup and instructs me to drink. I take a small sip and promptly spit it back out. "Fucking vinegar," I blurt out. I wince in pain at the jerking of my own movements. My leg is wrapped in leaves and sticks with twine holding it all together. The shaman stares at me with no regard for my comfort in the situation. My arms won't allow me to pick my body up. I slam back onto the floor and let out a small gasp. The shaman shakes his finger at me. Later in the day, I'm told by the chief that I'd caught a fever and had been asleep for a few days. They were worried the wound had been infected. I was lucky it wasn't, and that I woke back up when I did. Water and food were rationed to me slowly. I had to build back up my normal diet. The warriors stayed close to the shaman's hut, and even some came to check up on me. The chief had the village on high alert due to the wolf. No one was allowed out past dark, or early in the morning. Smaller fires were lit on the outside of the houses, and the big fire pit was twice its normal size. Sitting still was never one of my strong suits. I'd always been the type of person to keep my mind occupied with something. The concept of lying around to heal was foreign. It took 2 weeks for the wounds to close on their own. Daily I would try to stand, and daily I was forced to sit in the shaman's hut. The chief would bring his teapot in the mornings, and the three of us would chat. In nearly 3 months, I'd picked up most of the language. I could understand the villagers at least, and they helped me fill in the blanks. The shaman was a loose cannon for sure, always taking some new medicine or on a drunken stupor. I asked the shaman about the alcohol. He told me they traded a monkey for it. The location was northeast of here and was asked if I could get more. Like another rite of passage, I would be given a shamanic name in return. My pack swings against my shirt as I hobble over the roots sticking out of the ground. I was headed northeast of the village in a direction I'd never been. It was equally as exciting as it was terrifying. The tree trunks became wider and farther between each other. Even the light was beginning to fade from the giants. I watched the leaves, the ferns, my ears pick up every sound, and eyes every movement. It took a couple hours to reach the edge of the forest. The trees began to let light in and became smaller as I approached the clearing. My bag falls off my shoulder onto the trunk laying on the ground. I bend over and take out some jerky for lunch. The wind rifles through the leaves above me, cooling my body temperature. Take a minute to catch my breath before placing the backpack where it was. I shield my eyes from the sun. Before I can open my eyes, I smell burning. I turn back to the trees and observe them slowly. There's a tree trunk smoking ever so slightly, a speck of light glistening at the right angle. Again, I shield my eyes and look toward the vast sand dunes in front of me. Crystallized lightning nearly 100 feet tall was catching the sun, setting the trunk ablaze. I strain against the sand until I'm close enough to push the glass structure. It refuses to move with my force, its thickness around 4 inches. I take out my shovel and begin hacking at it. Sparks fly as the structure wobbles. I step back and swing the shovel like throwing a shot put ball. The base chips around the head of the shovel, and the structure cracks instantly up its core. I fall to the ground looking up in horror. The glass still stands miraculously. After standing, the last strike takes it down. I rush over to the tree and assess the damage. The thick bark was largely untouched. It was even still damp. I collapse and breathe a sigh of relief. I had no clue how far this city was the shaman talked about. He said the pyramids would stand out against the dunes if they weren't yet covered. My water supply was half gone now. I'm starting to wonder if I should turn back. My right foot twinges in pain, sending me plummeting down a dune. I was in the shade, yet I could feel the light brandishing my face. My neck strains to lift its head, but complies. The pyramids, and an entire city in ruins, looked to be just a mile out. Gold Top's the largest one. I leap to my feet and make a beeline for the rubble. From here, it looked massive. The closer I got, though, the smaller it seemed to get. As I stumble on the first bricks in the sand, I notice their size. It would take painstaking effort to make buildings with such small material. Most of them are the size of rocks in a river. The building even had rusted metal peering out of some of the bricks. The buildings came closer together as I got to the pyramid. More metal and broken pottery is strewn everywhere. I had yet to see any skeletons or rotting food. The silence itself was unsettling enough. The pyramid was as tall as the crystallized lightning. Its stairs so small I had to take them sideways. At the top was a small room. I walked in slowly as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Chapter 15. The room was like a narrow hallway on the inside. The walls seemed to follow me as the light grew faintly in front. A statue appears in front of me, a chimpanzee holding a mushroom. It was made of solid gold. Curiosity took hold of me as I grabbed the mushroom. Amanita muscaria. I recognized it instantly. The stem isn't connected to the monkey's hands. I inspect it carefully as the sound of slow rushing water fills the room. I look up from the mushroom to see the walls now have water on them, its current flowing up toward the ceiling. The mushroom in my hands is now real, vibrant, malleable. The statue in front of me moves slightly. The monkey was no longer gold either. He stares at me blankly before motioning me to eat. I look at the white spots poking out of its mantle before deciding to put it in my mouth. I swallow without chewing very much, a taste of dirt, bark, and some other earthly notes. The monkey was no longer in front of me. I glance around the room as a high-pitched frequency envelops my ears. The frequency increases in both volume and its peak. I drop the mushroom and cover my ears. The water in front of me is interrupted in 2 places by 2 younger chimps. They help me to my feet and instruct me to follow. They take me through the water and into another hallway. This one had a staircase leading toward the basement of sorts. We rounded the corner to the side of another larger hallway, filled with other chimps. Most of them walk on 2 legs. Some carry baskets or papers. 2 chimps stand next to the stairs with the 3 of us. The 2 escorts make their way down the hallway, leaving me with the older chimps. Questions were beginning to fill my mind. Each of them answered in my mind. The monkeys ahead of me were motioning with their hands as the answers came in. Telepathic communication. From what I understood, these chimps used to live around the pyramids. They had a society like Earth back in the early 2000s. Some chimps wanted to remain primitive and revolted against the coalition of their society. Their war lasted years before what they called their ascension. I had taken the same path as the rest of them getting here, what seemed to be another plane of existence. Even knowing that, I wasn't frightened. We spoke of the shaman. To them, he was here just within the week. It was closer to a few years in his time. I was informed the mushroom was beginning to wear off, and my escorts appeared behind me. They took me back to the same room and walked back through the water once more. Chapter 16. The golden statue was there again. Hallway once again like a living organism spitting me back out into the world. I shield my eyes from the light and look into the rubble. The sun is directly overhead, creating a hot spot on my scalp. I was careful not to trip on the way down the staircase. Walking through the rubble, I began to hear crumbling in the buildings nearby. A stone falls off the ruins just to my right as I feel the wind rush past my neck. A wooden spear sticks out of the ground just 10 feet to my left. I turn around to see 2 chimps headed in my direction, one wielding a club. I face forward again to see another chimp jumping off the ruins. They have my position triangulated. I turn left to face the 2 chimps with weapons and keep the third in eyesight. The 2 with clubs lunge in unison. I let them get a few steps in before trapping them in my matter control. They screamed, and their eyes are nearly bloodshot. The third monkey was irate. His eyes are wide and darting between his friends. He lunges next, only for a brief moment. I watch as the spear lodges itself into his skull, and his body crumples into the sand. I set the other chimps down, and they ran into the dunes. My eyes couldn't find the killer. My nerves told me I was in danger, yet I couldn't move. One leg makes its appearance around the rubble, followed by the leathery torso. Her hair was brown, long, and matted. A forehead larger than my own. She was a fierce, hardened warrior who was smiling at me. She nods her head to the east, asking me to follow. I watch her lift the chimp with one hand and sling its arms around her neck. We walk in silence through the desert and further from the forest. It took us about an hour to cross the sand, the trees getting larger as we ventured forward. They were teeming with life, from birds to reptiles and more. Vines and flowers enveloped the trunks. We were northeast of the village and headed into a spectacularly dense jungle. Within the first steps, the temperature gradually changed. The woman with me did as well. It was hard to keep pace with her in the sand. Now I had to parkour over everything just to keep up. She would stop occasionally, waiting for me, jungle around us wailing and flinging vegetation wildly. It took us a few hours from the desert until the woman finally stopped. Her hut was made out of large bones protruding out of the soil, and leaves covered the exterior. She ushers me inside. There was a blue-green hue coming from the walls. Mushrooms line the top where the sticks and twigs begin to form the roof. Herbs and vegetation are scattered in little holes everywhere I look. The woman takes a seat on her bed and plops the monkey onto a tree trunk. She quickly begins to skin and cut the meat. I sit on the floor and watch her meticulously. She takes a pot off the wall, much like a wok, throwing in spices and vegetables one at a time. After a few minutes, she adds the meat, stirring occasionally. She hands me a bowl steaming hot with a wooden spoon. I notice her staring as I blow on the food before putting it in my mouth. It was an explosion of flavor, almost enough to take away from the gamey aspect in the meat. We eat in mostly silence. I catch her gaze as I cough slightly. She's finished already. Yuchevik, she says, pointing to herself. Her finger now points at me as I struggle to swallow my food. Blane, I say back to her through a mouthful of food. I finish the last few bites as she puts away the pan and herbs. Without warning, she takes off her leather clothing and reveals her voluptuous body. Blood fills my cheeks as I try not to look her way. I thank her for the meal and begin to stand when she walks over to me with a curious look in her eyes. She lifts me in the air by my armpits and sets me into place on two sticks poking out of the wall and bending them to pin me in place. My pants fall on the dirt as her eyes glance downward. She was a gentle giant, even if she didn't ask for permission. Chapter 17. Yuchevik was awake, admiring the monkey pelt in her hands and tracing a pattern out with a rock. I shift slightly, making her jolt. She was so lost in thought and nearly forgot about me. It was cute. A small fire was enough to keep the hut warm. I watch her prepare breakfast with mushrooms and other vegetation I couldn't identify. I take the bowl as if I could say no to this woman and get away with it. I could see the gears turning, fighting with herself in her head. Her body urged to be close, but mind was still afraid. I watched as she took every opportunity to touch my hands or face. She was gentle and slow in movement. I follow her out of the hut, looking again at the vast jungle. It was alive with animals screaming, flying, and doing what nature does. Yuchevik grabs my wrist and leads me further north. She didn't seem to be scared at all, like a New Yorker weaving through the homeless as they praise her. Some of the wildlife was following us as well. We walked over tree roots, under fallen trunks, and carefully down drop-offs. Wherever this woman was taking me, in her eyes it was worth the journey. I could see a small clearing just ahead, creatures above us swinging through the canopy wildly, so fast I couldn't even hear the leaves. Yuchevik finally stopped at the base of a drop-off a few hundred feet down. At the other side of the circular drop was a small creek dumping water into a lagoon. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen on the planet. I watch in horror as Yuchevik grabs a vine next to us, and then grabs me. I scream at her as she expertly swings us from vine to vine until we reach the dirt-filled soil. She laughs at me as I try to gain my composure. I sit close to the water while she laughs maniacally. It took a minute to watch the waterfall, and even saw a few fish just out of reach. Yuchevik was being quiet for once. I turned to face her only to realize she was ensnared in the grasp of an anaconda so thick it was baffling. I shot up from the ground and in desperation tried to move the snake even an inch from its grasp, to no avail. The next second, a weight is lifted off the ground along with the snake. I struggled to regain balance, taking my matter control off the snake. An orangutan the size of a building is unwrapping Yuchevik from its grasp. She screams for air as her body hits the sand. I watch in awe as the orangutan twists the snake into a ball and throws it over the treetops, back into the forest. He turns to Yuchevik, studying her closely. I help her back to her feet, and she hugs the monkey. They have a sort of conversation through grunts and small body movements. The orangutan lets out a bellowing growl from his lungs. Immediately, the tree trunks above us are swinging as an entire flock of orangutans make their way to the lagoon. Some used the vines to get down. Others had wings protruding from their back. The noise level increased dramatically. Yuchevik stands next to me and rubs my arm, ensuring we're safe. Another orangutan makes its way to Yuchevik with a gourd in its hand. The liquid inside sloshes around. Yuchevik takes the gourd and thanks the orangutan. She drinks the liquid before offering me some. I take the gourd and sniff the opening. It's sweet, with a pungent side. One swig has my nerves standing on edge. This is what the shaman has been drinking. I had to hold back my astonishment. As I hand back the gourd, she talks to the orangutans around us. Chapter 18. I awoke to the sound of wood being split. Yuchevik was outside getting a head start on the day. Sleeping on the floor was rough, and my muscles were sore. She catches my gaze when I exit the hut. The redness in her cheeks was almost hidden by her hair. She stops for a moment to smile at me as I walk over. I point to her house, then back at myself, and make a walking motion with 2 fingers. Yuchevik looks away slightly while nodding her head. I start walking away and notice she isn't following. I turn back to catch her gaze and motion her to follow. She grins from ear to ear and throws the axe in the dirt. We take a much more direct path south towards the village. South by southeast as the sun rises to burn my neck. I know the locals laughed at the skin peeling off my body at least once. Even Yuchevik is darker than I am. We enter the clearing just south of the village that seems to be busy napping. Yuchevik follows behind me and forgets to shut the door. She inspects my bed, bookshelf, and computer with wonder in her eyes. The chief knocks on the door slightly, stopping as soon as he sees Yuchevik. Her head whips in his direction, and she slightly cowers. Yuchevik is hiding behind my table as I stand between her and the chief. I console her in a soft voice while shaking the chief's wrist. She carefully stands, still having to crouch in my low ceiling. The chief walks over to us slowly, reaching out his hand. They greet each other, while the chief utters a phrase not in his own language. Yuchevik is frozen in place. Tears begin to roll down her cheeks as she speaks the same phrase back. The two take a moment to separate from each other and find a place to sit. The chief explains that Yuchevik's people fell ill a number of years ago. They tried to send help, but were told to stay away from safety. The sickness killed most of her family, and she was perhaps the only survivor. I take his words for a moment and look towards Yuchevik, who is inspecting a book. I thank the chief for being understanding and ask him to let her get acclimated on her own time. I make Yuchevik and I some elk with a root vegetable. She admires my handiwork on my wood bowls and spoons. She devours the bowl in seconds, handing it back to me with a smile. I fill it for her again. After we eat, I clean up the house while Yuchevik lies on the bed, half on and half off. She passes out within a few minutes. Deep sleeper too, as she doesn't wake when I drop one of the bowls. Since I had a better forge, ideas began circling in my mind. I drew up plans for the next project and soon found myself coding. I would occasionally glance at Yuchevik as her chest rises and falls. Chapter 19. I'd fallen asleep at the chair again. My neck strains against itself as I lift my head to see the monitor. There is a message on it addressing me. Blane Morrison, this is Command Fleet 1. Orbital satellite has lost visual. Please report back. It would be just my luck they contact me the second I begin to enjoy my time here. I close the message as Yuchevik begins to shuffle awake. She catches my gaze and hides her face in the blanket. I watch her shuffle around on the bed as she outstretches a hand my way. She beckons me to come join her, but I get up and make breakfast instead. Yuchevik sits so close to me that our shoulders and legs touch. We eat in mostly silence. I walk to the door and wait for her to join me. She closes it behind her, and we head toward the village. Warriors and kids surround us as we get closer. The kids grab Yuchevik's hand and drag her away while I laugh. I enter the chief's hut and sit with him and the shaman. I begin to explain my next project to them, but they seem uninterested. The shaman grants me the use of the forge and a team if I need it. The next hut over is where Yuchevik ended up. I peek my head in to see her laughing and putting beads on small ropes. The door makes no noise as I close it and head back to the house. It was only half an hour in my mind that had passed. Yuchevik opens the door with a bowl in her hands and walks to me with a smile. Her cheeks still blush slightly when she stares a bit too long. I kiss her hand before she leaves. Again the time flew by. Yuchevik comes back adoring a new shirt for me, and of course a few beaded ones for herself. It surprised me how well she was able to fit in so fast. Half the time it took me to even begin learning their language. She was a natural learner. I let her cook tonight. Even though she complained about not having her seasonings and plants, she did make a meal that rivaled my cooking. After dinner, I talked her ear off about the new project. She was just as supportive as she was confused. Things continued like this for the next week. Halfway through, I began my work in the forge with some of the warriors. Word of my latest project had spread, and almost everyone couldn't wait to see the finished project. We spent the first few days shaping and organizing the metal, then began working on screws and bearings. It was grueling and mostly inefficient. The warriors refused to give up, though. It motivated me. We put all the parts together, and now it was time for the hardware. Yuchevik, the chief, and the warriors at the forge join us at my desk. I fashion the Raspberry Pi and strap it to the metallic frame. The warriors helped me step into the contraption with slight confusion. Then I gave the signal. I flip on the switch, and the indicator light illuminates. Success! To everyone else, this moment was underwhelming, to say the least. I asked them to join me outside and toward the nearest tree. They watch as with my hand alone, I push the entire tree to bend slightly. The warriors tilt their heads in confusion. The chief stares blankly while stroking his beard, and Yuchevik can hardly hold her excitement. A mixed bag of reactions, but I'll take it. Using this new exoskeleton and the matter control, it'd be pretty hard to kill me now. I wanted to test it out on some rocks, but I would need to build another energy transmitter first. Yuchevik and I head back inside while everyone else makes their way back to the village. No doubt they would want a better show next time. The children will love to see me picking things up even the strongest warrior can't. Yuchevik asks to wrestle me while I wear the suit. I ponder on it a minute before asking to take a range check. I'm quite positive she could still overpower me slightly. Chapter 20. I could tell Yuchevik was beginning to get homesick. She began to grumble at the same few meals I would put in front of her. She picked up the language faster than I did and began speaking to me. We decided going back and forth between the two huts was tiresome. I talked with the village chief about making a house that would fit her height. He had no objections, as long as we moved into the village. I helped Yuchevik draw up the plans. She spoke to the villagers and made plans of her own for the interior. Once everything was determined, we took off to get Yuchevik's things from her house. She was skipping into the trees. We got back to her hut in around an hour, I'd say. Yuchevik starts throwing food into a bag without much thought. I spent the time gathering and putting things together. After we exit, Yuchevik looks back at it longingly. She wants to keep some of the bones used to keep the structure up. We argue for a minute before she rips one of them out of the soil. Stubborn as a bull she is. Refused to let it slow her down, too. We stopped by the orangutans, and Yuchevik traded some of her herbs for more juice. It was clear we'd still be making the journey here to get it. She glares at me for letting out a chuckle. Then we depart. The grass parts from our legs as we enter the clearing. I spot the chief who was searching for us. A few children begin rushing in our direction, yelling. So much for a quiet return. Yuchevik grins from ear to ear. A few short hours later, we sit together on a log around the fire pit in the village. People surround us, asking questions or playing with Yuchevik's hair. She loves the attention. I was still getting used to it. The shaman and warriors sang and danced the night away. Food and orangutan juice was passed around to share, while laughter filled the air. Even the chief let loose a little. I shared stories of getting the orangutan juice and the anaconda that nearly ate Yuchevik. Each time I turned to her to see the sparkle in her eyes. It was abundantly clear she hadn't felt this alive in some time. Much the same for me. The entire village decided to help us with the new house. After the warriors and I built the foundation, we broke for lunch. Yuchevik and the woman who had most of the linens done, and the furniture was also picked out. I joined in on the furniture making until the foundation was dry. Then we began laying bricks. We did the interior walls, then the exterior before the roof. It took another 2 days. Now it was up to Yuchevik. The warriors and I went to hunt. A stray boar stuck in the trunk of a tree was easy prey for the party, and we each took a leg to carry back. The feast that night was spectacular. Each night, Yuchevik and I felt more at peace. We learned most of the language as well. We spent the next couple of days moving things in. Yuchevik delegated where to place the furniture, and the warriors did the lifting. We now had a bedroom, kitchen, and living room, with a small table by the door. Yuchevik plans for a garden in the back to grow herbs. For now, the back door only leads to a dirt patch. It took us the entire day moving and readjusting. When all was said and done, the two of us retired to our new home.